Welcome to Pistol Reloading with Big Agitator. Today we're going to be talking about press selection and sort of the tools of the trade you're going to need to get set up with reloading. So sort of a basic of all the different things you're going to need. Let's get started. Okay, first off, let's talk about what reloading is. Basically, you go out to the range, you fire off a bunch of rounds, you have a great time. At the end of the day, you're left with hundreds of these shells. And what we're going to be talking about is how to turn this used brass into something useful. So, what we're going over is the process of how to take pistol powder, pistol bullets, and these old shells and make new usable rounds that are even better than the store-bought stuff in a lot of cases, if you do things right. For my particular caliber, in this case 44 Magnum, these 100 shells right here would be over $70 if you were to buy cheap ammo. Now, the cost that it takes me to make all these is about $20. So, definitely cost effective. And we're going to get into bullet casting later on down the road, and I'll talk about how you can save even more money. So, basically doing this, you save a lot of money, you end up with a really nice hobby, and you also get to learn a lot. Next thing we're going to talk about is caliber selection. So, if you have like a 9mm or something like that, you probably won't benefit as much from reloading. Of course, you can still do it and get high quality ammunition. The thing is, 9mm ammunition is so cheap to begin with that you're not making a big gain. Now for 44 Magnum, 454 Casull, etc., reloading can be very cost effective. Now as far as consumables, let's start with what you need as far as consumables to get started. You're going to need bullets that you can buy at Midway USA online. You can buy them at Cabela's, etc. You're going to need shell casings, either retumbled old casings, or you can also buy new bags of shell casings. And they just call it, sometimes you can get once fired brass, or you can buy brand new brass. You're going to need primers. We'll go into primer selection later. And the same with powder. You're going to need smokeless powder. You're going to want to choose the right kind, that is mandatory. And we'll go into powder selection later, as well as bullet selection. But you're going to need bullets, powder, primers, shell casings, and you're going to need a reloading manual. You're going to at least need one. You can get information about reloading online. You must check it with a published reloading manual before using the loads, because the kind of stuff we're working with can be very dangerous. Okay, now as far as reloading equipment you're going to need, let's start off with the press. You are definitely going to need a reloading press. And this is a Lee Classic turret press, which means it has a revolving turret with all of your dies. You can buy what they call a single stage press, which only holds one die at a time. So you'd simply do one operation to your shell casings and do it to all of them. Set them aside, switch dies, go to the next die in the series, and do that operation to all your cases. With this turret press, you simply put your shell casing in and do one operation, and when that's finished, when you retract the lever, you go to the next operation, do that operation, it rotates again, do the next operation, it rotates again, and do the next operation, and you have a finished round. Now, that is handy, and you might wonder why everyone doesn't use these presses. With a single stage press, they're much stronger, and also, you don't have any free play. Now this free play is all factored in with the adjustment, so it's not a big deal. If you're doing accurate rifle shooting, I would not necessarily recommend this press. The single stage presses are definitely more accurate. They're also less expensive in some cases. So if you're just getting started, they may be a good option. And it never hurts to have one of those presses around. I personally prefer this press because I do primarily pistol reloading, and it really speeds things up. I would not recommend the cheaper version of the Lee turret press, the one with the aluminum pieces, or I think it's pot metal. This is a pretty rugged press. This is all cast iron, so it's really pretty stout. You don't have to worry too much about breaking it. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the dies. Now I bought a Lee carbide die set, which you're going to need. That's actually the wrong label. I got it in this box. A set of dies for pistols is about $25 to $30, and I bought a fourth die for crimping, and we'll go into that later. Basically, you just need a 3-die set to get started. Your first die is going to have a decapping pin, and what that does is it pushes out your old primer. It also resizes the shell casing to the proper dimension, because after they're fired they expand. So you want to make sure they're all consistent. The next die is a powder through expander. When the case is forced into this die, the mouth of the case is slightly flared so that the bullet can be seated. When the case is pushed up into this die, the powder is simply metered in. The measured amount is induced through the top of the die, and it all goes into the shell casing. And then the final die in the 3-die set is a bullet seating die. You adjust the depth your bullet is going to be pressed into the case. When you pull the lever, you're forcing your shell with a bullet on top up into this die, which is forcing the bullet into the case at the right depth, and at the same time crimping the bullet in place. Now, some people prefer a factory crimp, and they'll buy an additional die, and when you pull the lever, it simply crimps the case to whatever amount you set it to. Now, with any press, you need a shell holder. What this does is simply fit into your press, and it holds the shell casing in place while the different operations are being performed. Now, you can see different cases need different size shell holders. With the Lee reloading die sets, you get a shell holder, but with some other brands you don't. I tend to prefer the Lee. I mean, they seem to be cost effective, and the ones with carbide don't need lubrication, so you don't have to lubricate your brass before you do the reloading operations. If you want more precise dies, I've heard Hornady makes really good dies, as well as RCBS, but everyone has their own preference. I'd recommend that you read some reviews online and make your own decision, but you can't really go wrong with the Lee products in my opinion. So we've got our press and die stuff out of the way for the time being. Let's go over your powder measuring, because you simply put the bullets, you can put the bullets right on the shells by hand. So the other equipment you're going to need is, you're definitely going to need a beam scale, which you can zero with a little knob. I have a Lee. I've heard bad reviews about them. I would recommend you look into RCBS as well as Hornady and make your own decision, but this scale has treated me pretty well. It seems to be really accurate. And the other thing is, you're going to need, it really helps to have a powder dribbler, because you simply turn this knob and it'll dribble a trickle of powder into the pan. So what you can do is use a little scoop and put the right amount of powder in your scale, and then dribble until the scale zeroes out at the right level. So it definitely speeds things up. You can also buy an automatic powder dispenser that goes onto your press, and every time you pull the lever, it simply dispenses the right amount of powder. So those are really nice, but they're not as accurate. They're definitely not as accurate as a scale. So I would recommend, I mean, even if you have a powder measure, you have to have one of these scales to check it. So the first thing you have to buy is this, and that'll get you started. Okay, in wrapping up this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about reloading benches. Now, you need a bench that you can bolt your press to that's nice and rigid. So what I did was I found this old relic, and I beefed the hell out of it with all these reinforcements, and I X-braced it in the back, and I also, I noticed it wobbled around a lot, so I ended up stacking a bunch of lead on it, and I also took my 1/2-inch impact wrench and drove a couple of 10-inch lags down through my floor. Now, the only thing with that is you got to make sure that there's nothing under by your joists that you would drive the lags through, such as a water pipe or a electrical wire. So be careful if you do something like that, but it definitely, I mean, you can actually do push-ups leaning against this bench and it won't move. So that's really nice. It cuts down on the stress when you're working your press. You don't have to worry about knocking everything over. You really don't want all your shell casings and everything and all your powder supplies to get knocked over by your bench shaking around. So keep that in mind, and the next segment we'll go a little more in depth about the process of reloading, and we'll go over brass preparation, etc. So stay tuned.